You learn more about a woman from your absence than from your presence. When you're there, texting, calling, checking in, nothing inside her needs to move. Your attention creates comfort. Your effort creates certainty. But the moment you step back, something invisible begins to stir, not on the surface, inside her mind. Men think women only feel something when affection is given. But the deepest reactions don't happen when you show up. They happen when something familiar quietly disappears. That silence does something her pride will never admit. Because your absence forces her to face a truth she could ignore before. You were never guaranteed. Before we go deeper, like this video so other men searching for clarity can find it. Subscribe for lessons on discipline, detachment, and inner strength. And if you're ready, start this journey now. In the comments, choose where you stand. Drop 1 if you're still waiting for her reaction. Drop 2 if you're building a life that no longer needs one. I read every comment because where you stand matters. This video isn't about games or manipulation. It's about understanding value, yours. Because sometimes your consistency gets overlooked. Sometimes your presence becomes invisible. And sometimes the only way truth reveals itself is through distance. But listen carefully. If you don't understand what happens in the first stage of silence, you'll react at the worst possible moment and undo everything before it even begins. Let's dive in. 1. Confusion. When your silence breaks her certainty. The first thing she feels when you go quiet isn't anger, and it isn't indifference. It's confusion. And most men underestimate how powerful that moment really is. Here's what's happening beneath the surface. When you were present, consistent, available, predictable, your attention slowly became part of her emotional environment. Not thrilling, not dramatic, just reliable. You were the message that arrived on time, the voice that checked in, the steady presence she didn't have to question, and when something feels permanent, the mind stops examining it. Certainty replaces curiosity, then something shifts. You stop reaching out, your energy changes. You're no longer initiating, explaining, or checking in to keep the rhythm alive. And before her ego has time to form a story, her nervous system reacts. Why is he quiet? Did something happen? Is he upset with me? Did I do something wrong? This confusion isn't about missing you yet. It's about lost certainty. The foundation she didn't realize she was standing on suddenly feels unstable. If she truly didn't care, there would be no confusion. There would be relief. Confusion only exists when something meaningful has been disrupted. That's the part most men miss. Confusion means your presence carried weight, even if she never acknowledged it out loud. It means you mattered in ways she didn't articulate, because comfort often hides value until it's gone. But here's the line that separates power from weakness. Silence is louder than words only when it's authentic. If your silence is filled with hope, waiting, or quiet resentment, she feels that too. It leaks through. It doesn't unsettle her. It reassures her that you're still emotionally available, just paused. That kind of silence changes nothing. Real silence is different. When you step back without anger, without announcements, without explanations, when you don't try to control the narrative, confusion deepens, not because you're playing a game, but because you've removed certainty without replacing it with drama. That's when the first crack appears. Not a collapse, not regret. A fracture in what she assumed was guaranteed. And once certainty breaks, the mind can't stay still. It starts searching, watching, filling in gaps. The silence begins to echo, not because of what you said, but because of what you no longer need to say. And here's where it gets uncomfortable for her, because when confusion doesn't find answers, it doesn't disappear. It transforms, and what it turns into next is the moment she starts paying attention in a way she never did before. 2. Curiosity. When she starts watching instead of talking. The moment confusion runs out of answers, something quieter, and far more revealing, takes its place. She doesn't ask you what's going on, she watches. When your silence doesn't come with explanations, her mind shifts into observation mode. She doesn't reach out. She doesn't demand clarity. Instead, she studies patterns because women don't need words when behavior tells a story. Attention moves from conversation to surveillance, and what once felt invisible to her suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. She notices whether you viewed her story. She sees when you're online but don't respond. She pays attention to what you post, when you post, and who engages with you. Things she once scrolled past without a thought now carry weight. Not because you changed who you are, but because the predictability of your presence disappeared. Uncertainty reactivates attention. It sharpens awareness, and that's why curiosity begins to grow. You are no longer behaving like the man who will always come back. You are no longer available on demand. And that shift alone makes you interesting again, not in a superficial way, but in a psychological one. The mind becomes alert when it can no longer forecast outcomes. Here's a hard truth many men in their late 30s and early 40s need to hear. Most women expect men to unravel emotionally when they pull away. They expect chasing. They expect explanations. They expect proof that their absence caused damage. And when that response doesn't come, curiosity intensifies because the script breaks. She starts asking questions she never asked before. Is he talking to someone else? Why does he seem unaffected? Why didn't he fall apart like I thought he would? These aren't conscious strategies. They're instinctive reactions to unpredictability. This isn't manipulation, it's psychology. Curiosity grows strongest when she cannot read your emotional state. When your behavior no longer confirms her assumptions, her attention gravitates toward you. And the more grounded, stable, and focused you appear, the deeper that attention sinks. Calm is confusing when chaos was expected. Stability becomes intriguing when emotional collapse was assumed. What most men don't realize is that curiosity doesn't form because you're trying to be mysterious. It forms because you're no longer seeking validation. Your energy feels self-contained. Your life appears to be moving forward without needing her to respond or react. And that unsettles the mind. Because curiosity is rarely neutral. It's a transitional emotion. At first, she's simply watching. But the longer answers don't arrive, the more that curiosity turns inward. Observation becomes reflection. Patterns become questions about meaning. And meaning inevitably leads to evaluation. And once curiosity stops being about what you're doing and starts becoming about what she might have misread, the shift deepens because the next feeling doesn't focus on you at all. It turns the spotlight directly back onto her. 3. Doubt, when she stops questioning you and starts questioning herself. This is the moment everything quietly turns, and most men never even realize it happened. Because the questions stop pointing at you and start pointing inward. At first, her attention was outward. She wondered what you were doing, where you went, why your energy changed. But as your absence remains steady, calm, unannounced and real, the narrative shifts. The question is no longer, what's going on with him? It becomes, what did I do? Your absence forces that shift. When you were present, she had time. She could delay responses. She could assume you'd stay. She could believe your attention was a constant, something she could come back to later. Permanence creates comfort, and comfort dulls reflection. But silence breaks that illusion, not violently, gradually, and in that quiet space, doubt begins to grow. Was I too distant? Did I misjudge him? Why did he stop trying? These questions don't come from guilt yet. They come from disruption. Something that felt stable no longer is, and the mind searches for a reason. She starts replaying moments, not the dramatic ones, not the arguments or emotional spikes, but the quiet scenes that once felt insignificant. The effort you gave without asking for praise, the patience you showed when things were unclear, the consistency that didn't demand anything in return, and slowly something uncomfortable takes shape. You weren't a burden. You weren't too much. You were an emotional asset. That realization doesn't arrive gently. It challenges her self-image. Because if you were valuable, then the loss carries weight. And if the loss carries weight, then her choices matter more than she originally thought. Here's the rule most men need to understand. A woman only doubts herself when she feels the loss of a good man. If you didn't matter, there would be no internal conflict. There would be no replaying, no quiet questioning, no unease. Doubt is not weakness. It's reassessment. It's the mind recalculating value after access is removed. At first, her pride resists. Pride always does. It tells her she was justified, that she did nothing wrong, that she can replace what she lost. But pride needs noise to survive. Silence starves it. And your calm absence gives doubt the space it needs to grow roots. This is where many men make a critical mistake. They break silence to relieve the tension. They explain, they clarify, they offer reassurance. And in doing so, they rob doubt of its natural process. They hand her certainty again before she's finished questioning herself. But when you don't intervene, when you don't rush to be understood, doubt matures. It deepens. It starts reshaping how she remembers you, not as someone chasing her approval, but as someone who brought stability into her life and left without resentment. That's when the emotional weight shifts. Because once doubt takes hold, it doesn't stay isolated. It creates vulnerability. And vulnerability opens the door to an emotion far more intense than curiosity or confusion, the fear of loss made visible. And when doubt stops being an internal whisper and starts colliding with the idea that someone else might take your place, it transforms into something she can no longer ignore. 4. Jealousy. When the fear of being replaced finally appears. Jealousy doesn't announce itself with anger or accusations. It arrives quietly, when she realizes she might no longer be the center of your attention. This stage doesn't look dramatic from the outside. There are no confrontations, no emotional outbursts. Instead, it unfolds in private moments, in silent observations she never admits to anyone else. She starts noticing other women around you. She pays attention to who likes your posts. She studies pictures longer than before, scanning details she once overlooked. Not because she wants chaos, but because uncertainty awakens competition. Even if she told herself she wasn't that invested, even if she acted detached or emotionally distant, she still enjoyed knowing she had access to you. She still found comfort in the idea that your attention was available, if not now, then later. Your absence threatens that sense of security, and jealousy is the emotional signal that something fundamental has changed. Control is no longer guaranteed. Here's the uncomfortable truth most men aren't told. Jealousy is often the first clear sign of emotional attachment. Not love, but investment. If she truly didn't care, she wouldn't look. She wouldn't compare. She wouldn't imagine scenarios where another woman might step into the space she once occupied. Jealousy doesn't come from possession. It comes from perceived loss. The more you improve, physically, emotionally, socially, the sharper this feeling becomes. When you look healthier, more focused, more grounded, her mind fills in gaps she doesn't like. Not because she owns you, but because she realizes someone else could now benefit from the version of you she underestimated. And that realization stings. This is where many men make a critical error. They sense the shift, they feel the tension, and out of guilt, nostalgia, or fear of losing the connection entirely, they break their silence. They reach out to soothe the discomfort, hoping to regain balance. But that's a mistake, because jealousy isn't resolution, it's pressure. Pressure reveals where attachment lives. It forces emotions to rise to the surface instead of staying buried under assumptions. And when you interrupt that process, you relieve the pressure before it has a chance to mature into clarity. What makes jealousy so powerful is that it's rooted in comparison. She starts measuring herself against the women around you. She wonders if they're more appreciative, more attentive, more aligned with the man you're becoming. And every unanswered question sharpens the feeling. This isn't cruelty, it's psychology. Jealousy is the moment she confronts the possibility she avoided before, that you might move on without needing closure, permission, or validation from her. That possibility forces her to reassess not just you, but her place in your life. And here's the part that matters most for you as a man in this stage of life. Jealousy isn't something to exploit, it's something to outgrow. When your silence remains steady and your growth continues without performance, jealousy has nowhere to land except back on her own awareness. Because pressure combined with time doesn't fade. It transforms, it deepens, it sharpens, and it carries the emotional weight forward into something far heavier than comparison. And when jealousy stops being about who else might want you and starts becoming about what she may have already lost, it evolves into a realization she can no longer avoid. 5. Regret. When she realizes your effort wasn't free. Regret doesn't strike when you first disappear. It arrives later, when silence stops feeling temporary and starts feeling final. At the beginning, she explains your absence away. She tells herself you're busy, distracted, going through something. Then she assumes you'll return, because that's what most men do. Most men circle back. Most men break first. Most men can't hold distance without leaking emotion. But when time keeps moving and you remain calm, grounded and gone, something shifts inside her. That's when regret enters, not suddenly, not dramatically, quietly. She starts remembering moments she once dismissed, messages she replied too late, effort she accepted without acknowledging, situations where she assumed your presence was guaranteed, not earned. What once felt small now feels heavier, because there is no reassurance coming to soften it. And then the realization lands. You weren't giving attention because you needed her. You were giving it because you cared. That distinction changes everything. Need-based attention feels replaceable. Care-based attention does not. When she understands that you weren't chasing validation but offering genuine effort, the loss takes on a different weight. She sees that what disappeared wasn't weakness. It was intention. Here's the truth most men never hear. Regret only forms when effort meets self-respect. Men who beg don't create regret. Their presence lingers too loudly. Men who stay angry don't create regret. Their emotion keeps the focus on them. Men who walk away intact, without bitterness, without pleading, create space for reflection. And reflection is where regret grows. She begins comparing other men to you, often without meaning to. Conversations feel flatter. Consistency feels rare. Attention feels conditional. Not because you were perfect, but because you were present and steady in ways she didn't fully recognize at the time. That's when the emotional contrast sharpens. Regret doesn't come from idealizing you, it comes from recognizing what's missing now. Your absence forces her to feel the difference between being valued and being pursued, between calm presence and scattered attention, between someone who showed up and someone who merely wants access. And the longer you remain unavailable, not emotionally closed, but self-contained, the heavier that realization becomes. This is where many men misunderstand regret. They think it's about punishment or revenge. It's not. Regret isn't inflicted, it's discovered. It emerges naturally when reflection has nowhere to escape. Silence creates the room. Time does the work. She starts wondering if she miscalculated, if she undervalued something stable because it felt familiar, if she mistook consistency for something she could always return to later. And that awareness carries emotional weight because it challenges her narrative. It reframes the past in a way that can't be undone. She sees that your effort wasn't free, automatic, or endless. It was a choice, and choices can be withdrawn. Regret is the moment she understands that. But regret alone doesn't end the journey. It doesn't resolve the tension. It deepens it. Because once reflection becomes heavy enough, it transforms into something far more personal. Something that moves from thought into feeling. And when regret stops being about what she did and starts becoming about what your absence now leaves behind, it opens the door to an emotion she can no longer intellectualize away. 6. Missing you. When absence turns into a feeling, this is where everything changes. Because your absence is no longer something she thinks about. It's something she feels. At this stage, the mind steps aside and the body takes over. She doesn't just notice that you're gone. She experiences the space you left behind. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, in moments that catch her off guard. She notices the times of day you used to check in, the small pauses where your presence once lived. The steadiness that anchored her routine without asking for credit. Women don't miss men first. They miss the emotional environment those men created. Your calm, your consistency, the feeling of being met without having to chase it. And what intensifies this feeling isn't just that you're gone, it's how you left. There were no arguments echoing in her head, no insults to soften the memory, no emotional collapse she could point to and say, "That's why." There was only distance, carried with dignity. That kind of silence communicates strength. And strength doesn't fade when it's no longer present. It lingers. It settles into the background of daily life and makes its absence felt in unexpected ways. Music starts triggering memories she didn't plan to revisit. Familiar places feel quieter than they should. Evenings stretch longer. Nights feel heavier. This is when pride begins to weaken. Not because she wants to admit anything, but because the feeling doesn't ask for permission. She drafts messages she never sends. She checks your profile more than once, not to analyze, but to feel close to something that's no longer accessible. She wonders if you'll reach out, even as she tells herself she shouldn't care. And here's the truth that gives your absence its power. She doesn't miss you because you chased. She doesn't miss you because you explained. She doesn't miss you because you tried harder than necessary. She misses you because you stopped. Because your silence wasn't performative. It wasn't a threat or a tactic. It was the natural result of a man who chose peace over proving his worth. And that tells her something words never could. You didn't leave to be noticed. You left because you no longer needed to stay. That realization changes how she feels about you. It elevates your value beyond anything you could have said while you were present, because people don't miss what they still have access to. They miss what they can no longer reach. And the deeper that feeling settles, the harder it becomes to ignore. Missing you doesn't demand action right away, but it erodes resistance. It softens defenses. It creates a quiet pull towards something unresolved. And when missing, you stops being a feeling she manages and starts becoming a question she can't avoid. What if I lost him for good? The final shift begins, where silence no longer feels safe for her at all. 7. Wanting you back, when control quietly switches hands. This is the final shift, and it doesn't look like desperation or loneliness. It looks like recognition. At this stage, she isn't chasing you. She's checking the door, carefully, quietly. She starts wondering if it's still open and whether she waited too long. Not with big confessions or emotional speeches, but with small, calculated signals meant to test the ground. A like on an old photo. A casual reply to something insignificant. A memory brought up randomly, as if it just crossed her mind. These aren't accidents, they're tests. Because by now, control has quietly changed hands. She's no longer deciding if you're worth her attention. She's wondering if she still qualifies for yours. And this is where most men lose themselves. They rush back the moment interest reappears. They explain where they've been. They overvalue her attention because it once felt scarce. A stoic man does none of that. He stays grounded. He doesn't punish her for the past, and he doesn't chase a future that hasn't proven itself yet. He doesn't argue with words or defend himself emotionally. He observes behavior because behavior is where truth lives. If she truly wants to return, effort becomes visible, not hints, not crumbs, real effort. Consistency replaces ambiguity. Respect shows up without being asked for. Her actions align with what she claims to feel. And if that doesn't happen, then she didn't miss you. She missed the comfort of being wanted. That distinction matters, because attention can be missed without value being present. But a man who is genuinely wanted back is met with clarity, patience, and follow-through, not uncertainty disguised as curiosity. Here's the empowerment most men need at this stage. If she comes back, you choose. Your silence revealed her feelings. Her actions reveal her intentions. You're no longer waiting to be selected. You're evaluating alignment. You're deciding whether the connection honors the man you've become, not the man you once were. This isn't about closing the door forever. It's about refusing to reopen it out of habit. When a man holds that standard calmly without resentment, the power dynamic remains where it belongs, with self-respect. And when a man realizes he doesn't need to be chosen to feel whole, the entire story shifts. Because whether she stays or leaves next, he walks forward unchanged, steady, and in control of his life. A woman feels the truth of a man most clearly in his absence, not his presence. Silence, when real, reveals everything. It reveals whether she valued the man or just the comfort he provided. It reveals whether connection was mutual or assumed. A man who can walk away without anger or begging becomes unforgettable, not because he disappears, but because he stands firm within himself. If she truly valued you, she will feel it deeply. If she didn't, she will move on easily. Either way, you gain clarity, and clarity is power. Let your absence speak. The right woman will respect it. The wrong woman will regret it. And you will always move forward stronger than before. Brother, if any part of this landed heavy, don't ignore it. Own it. Like this video, so men who are silently carrying the same weight can finally hear what they need. Subscribe. Grounded lessons in self-command, emotional clarity, and masculine strength. In the comments, write this line: I stop waiting, I start becoming. Because here's the truth most men learn too late. Your silence didn't fail because she didn't care. It failed because it was still tied to expectation. Real silence isn't absence with hope. It's presence within yourself. The moment you stop watching for her reaction, the moment you invest that energy into your body, your purpose, your standards, you stop needing to be remembered. And when a man no longer needs to be remembered, he becomes impossible to replace. Stay disciplined, stay grounded, and let your growth speak louder than anything you ever said.